Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart, of all of our hearts, be pleasing unto you, O Lord, our firm and impenetrable rock and redeemer. Amen. Friends, when I was in high school, I had this friend, and his name was Dean. And Dean, to be honest with you, he smoked a lot of weed. He came from a wealthy family, so he could afford to party. He and his family always took great vacations. They had great clothes, new cars, more disposable income than almost everybody. One day, Dean had gone out partying all night with his friends, and on the way home, he crashed his car into a mailbox, really dented up the front fender. When Dean arrived at his house, he didn't think much of it, parked the car right in the driveway, didn't think his parents needed to know. But soon enough, his father discovered what had happened, came and woke him up. And that's when Dean's father decided it was time to give his son a little bit of a talking to. Dean's dad tried to explain to him what a charmed life that he had, grown up healthy, wealthy. And when he asked Dean one of those life-changing questions, one of those questions that you just remember for a really long time, in this case, probably the rest of Dean's life, when his dad turned to him and he said, "Son, would you rather be envied or admired?" In other words, do you want people to look at you like some spoiled celebrity who can jet off here and there, have the latest now and wow clothing and gadgets, and essentially lead a life centered on yourself? Or would you rather be looked at, esteemed, as someone who actually made a difference in the world, who worked hard to improve what was around them, who was looked up to and admired for doing difficult things that benefited more than just themselves? Envied or admired? And this one talk made a big impact on Dean over the course of his remaining years in high school and in college. We all noticed a difference, how he straightened up, and he began to look at life, it seemed to us, no longer as this opportunity to show off his good fortune, but he began to cultivate a life that others could admire, doing things like giving back, like wanting to make a positive mark on the world, cultivating habits of gratitude and sacrifice, and showing a genuine concern for other people. My brothers and sisters, welcome to the last Sunday before Lent. That's right, Ash Wednesday, 3 days away, and in a profound way, it marks Jesus' decision not to be envied, but admired, as he moves away from the awesome miracles, the engaging sermons that he's so famous for, and he moves off towards this place of admiration. He moves away from those sermons and those miracles that made him popular and powerful, and to the journey that begins and that you and I mark in these next 40 days, when the crowds and his closest friends abandoned him as he laid down his life for others, as he sought what was not enviable but admirable. Find $1,000 in a wallet at the hotel lobby. Wow, you sure are lucky. I envy you. Turn it into the front desk. I admire you. Get a free cup of coffee at Starbucks because the guy in front of you paid for it through the drive-thru. I envy you. Turn around and pay for the guy in back of you. That's admirable. Make millions playing your heart out, leading the Detroit Lions. That's enviable. Help build an inner-city school on your way out the door. That's admirable. Leading an admirable versus enviable life, it's the goal of Christianity, isn't it, friends? It causes you and me to ask, what kind of mark do I want to make, and why? How am I using God's gift to make that mark? How am I getting distracted and allowing other things to capture my attention? Well, that's why I'm glad it's Lent. Lent is our annual exercise of cleaning out the clutter, getting back to the business of doing good, yet not necessarily easy things. Not the enviable, but the admirable. We look more at altruism and less at accumulation. This is when you and I are intentional about going back to God, taking that 40 days, that tithe, that 10% of the year, and saying, Lord, I'm going to pursue my better angels. I'm going to see what I can do to more succinctly focus on drawing close to you. I'm sure I'm not the only one who was riveted this past week to the President Trump's second impeachment proceedings. Did you watch them? The sounds and images that played out, bringing you and me back to one of the darkest moments of our democracy. It was up to our politicians to decide how the president will face any sort of penalty for the violence on Capitol Hill last month. These representatives, like you and me, have greater and lesser angels. And they operate in the complex world of politics. We all know it, right? Where trade-offs, negotiation, posturing, name of the game. And amidst this, I'm sure more than one of these folks asked in their hearts those deep, deep questions about the kind of life and legacy they're leaving behind as they made the decisions they made this week. Are the decisions they made, are they admirable? Are they seeking to live into virtues of honesty, integrity, justice, and fairness? Friends, it's up for you to decide that in your own heart. A writer named Haviland C. Houston once said this: cowardice asks, is it safe? Expediency asks, is it politic? Vanity asks, is it popular? Conscience asks, is it right? We want to admire our politicians, we want to admire our athletes, we want to admire our preachers. And we do that when they stand up for what's right. We do that when we show that they care as much about others as we do about ourselves. We do that when we exhibit a central word that describes the season of Lent. A central word to describe somebody who's admirable. We know what that word is, don't we? It's sacrifice. When we give of ourselves for the greater good, to pass an important yet perhaps not politically expedient law, put in the long hours to win a championship game, go to great lengths to help somebody in desperate need. These are admirable acts that Jesus shows us the importance of as he goes to the cross for others. And we find that in doing them, not only do we leave a formidable legacy, but we feed our own souls as well. One winter's night, when everybody was asleep in a small European town, there was a knock at Rabbi Mordecai's door. The rabbi, who was engrossed in Bible study, went to the door. He opened it up. There he saw an elderly traveler who had just arrived in town. The rabbi immediately welcomed and offered him hospitality. Since the man was cold, tired, and hungry, the rabbi immediately stoked the fire. Then he warmed up the oven and he heated up a meal for his weary guest. He then fetched pillows and blankets and he made up the man's bed. The traveler was so impressed, he said, Rabbi, please don't trouble yourself. I can fix my own bed. But the rabbi smiled and he said, my dear friend, please understand. I'm not fixing the bed for you. I'm fixing the bed for myself. As Proverbs 11:17 says, a kind person is being kind to his own soul. And so where do you and I find the strength to be kind to our own soul? Where do we find the strength to do those things that are admirable and not enviable? How do we make it past the temptations to take shortcuts and to, just settle for that dopamine hit? Well, one strategy I think we pick up in that reading that Ann Jeanette just read for us from the gospel, today's gospel, that iconic story of the Transfiguration, is that we remember the long game. I once did a funeral for a terrific man. He was well known, he was well liked, he was well loved by no one more than his wonderful wife. They had met in high school and they'd been married more than 60 years. Well, a few weeks after the funeral, I stopped by to visit this new widow, and I noticed that she had a ring prominently displayed right on the fireplace mantel. I got up to look at it. It was a wedding band. I asked the woman whose it was. Of course, was suspecting it was her husband's, and she said sure enough it was. I asked her why it was being displayed so prominently, and she said this: it's been so hard these last few weeks getting over his death. Some days are just unbearable. But when I look up at that ring, it reminds me of something very important. And that is, no matter how much pain I'm going through here, I have to be here for my family, for my work. But that ring reminds me that he's waiting for me. It's going to be worth it, and everything's going to be okay. When Peter, James, and John, they ascended that holy mount and they witnessed the glory of God like they've never seen it before, this was God's sign to a faithful and fragile band of Jesus followers that God is present, that God is powerful, that God is planning something for their lives, and they do well to rest in that confidence. It makes me wonder how those words apply to you and me this morning with all the stuff you and I bring to church, that no matter what challenge you and I are facing today, God is present, God is powerful, and God is using our lives to do something irreplaceably good in the world. Our challenge today, folks, is can we rest in that confidence? The kids have taken up skiing. Thank you, Jim Kenning and the Christian Service Brigade here at church for introducing our family to this very affordable sport. But the children love to show me how fast they can go down the hill, how they can race one another, and how quickly they can get down that big hill. And I have to gently remind them that the point of skiing is not getting to the bottom. It's how we feel while we're doing it. Life isn't about getting to the end as quickly as possible. It's about how we feel as we experience it. And we feel best by doing the right thing, by doing what's admirable. So as you and I leave from Zoom Church in a little while this morning, like the faithful disciples following Jesus down that mountain into 40 challenging days and headed for our own versions of perdition, hold fast, saints. Know that God is present, God is powerful, and God is using our lives to do something irreplaceably good in the world. May we be given strength and wisdom to do so admirably. Amen.